Hello everybody, I'm Andy with Liminal Entertainment Technologies, and in this video I am going to show you how to read the ZoomOSC documentation. I understand that people are coming at ZoomOSC from a lot of different levels. Some people have used APIs really freely in the past and understand kind of how to read it. We've tried to redo ours to make it more graphically understandable, but I think it would still help to have a supplementary video that just walks through the document and explains how you know how to use ZoomOSC from the different commands that we offer, because now we have quite a few ways that you can control it. So I'm going to just kind of walk us through the doc and hope that that helps you get up to speed with how you use ZoomOSC. So let's jump into it. So the first page of this document is just an introduction about ZoomOSC. It's a bidirectional OSC interface, so you can send commands to Zoom, or you can get information about Zoom back into the thing that you want to talk to Zoom with. So both directions. ZoomOSC can receive OSC and send OSC. There's three main types of categories of OSC messages for ZoomOSC. There's user commands, global commands, and outputs. User commands refer to specific participants in the Zoom call, or groups of them. Global commands aren't targeting anybody, but rather they're about the general meeting or the application setting. And then outputs are sort of self-explanatory. They're the things that come out of it. So there are things that can be triggered by events, like when somebody mutes their mic or turns their video on, you'll get an event from that. But there are other things that you can do. You send a user or global action to request information, then it'll reply on the output side. Quick start on ZoomOSC here. We use an OSC protocol, and the OSC protocol is sort of summarized on this page. So we use Open Sound Control as UDP. OSC messages come in two parts, a address and a payload or series of payloads. The address is slash delimited, which means that there's a slash between every part of it. And the white space is used to delimitate payloads in most applications. Strings are usually enclosed in the quotes to say, hey, even though there's a space between Andy and Carluccio, we want to send it as one argument, Andy Carluccio as my username. And then in ZoomOSC, every input starts with /zoom. So when you're building or sending a command to ZoomOSC, you always start with /zoom. Now, how do you know if you are using a user action, who you want to call that action on? Well, we give you a bunch of different ways of doing that. These are going to be the next things that we'll put sort of on the command that we're building here. So we can use a target ID, we can use a username, a gallery index, a Zoom ID, a gallery position on Mac, and me if you want to target yourself. So what's a target ID? Well, the way that ZoomOSC used to work, you would write out a text file with all the names of the people that you wanted to have control of. Then you would load it, and then it would give each of them a numeric control. Now, this is great for places like the theater, where you know what you're going to have, and it's a predictable environment, and you're able to actually, because of this, build a lot of preparatory work. It's not so great in the event spaces, where you don't know what's coming at you, and you need to be able to react a little more dynamically. So target ID is great for previous integrations that were made for ZoomOSC, or for people who have the ability to rehearse and premeditate, because it actually is quite powerful when you start to get into it. But target ID is sort of a legacy workflow for ZoomOSC. Then there's username. So this is pretty self-explanatory. This is just the name that somebody has in their Zoom meeting. So if I look at the Zoom call, you see down here in the bottom left, the person on screen right now that's pinned is John. And that would be John's username. So, and this will be fine if they rename, if they, join with one name and change it to a different name, that's fine. You don't have to remember what their original name was. It just updates on the fly. Gallery index. So if we think of the gallery as a list, so if I switch over to the gallery view, we can think of this as a list from left to right. John being 0, Liz being 1, and Jane being 2 in a 0 index list. And gallery index allows you to specify that number as the person you want to act on. So here we're not talking about, a specific person, but rather a specific slot, and whoever's in there will be the recipient of that action. Zoom ID is a randomly assigned number that Zoom creates for every person when they join a call. And the Zoom ID is something that changes when the person leaves and joins the meeting. So it's not persistent, but it is a unique way of identifying people numerically that doesn't require you to have any sort of preset files loaded or saved or anything like that. So it sometimes is advantageous, especially if you have people with the same name or something like that in the Zoom call, then you might want to use their Zoom ID. Now, gallery position is a cool feature that we have on the Mac. This allows you to look at the gallery view again, and instead of just referencing that person by sort of serializing or linearizing the gallery view and saying 0, 1, 2, you can actually say, I want the person in row 2, column 3. And that allows you to act on a specific action in a little more intuitive way than the gallery index. What's cool about the Mac is that it actually understands the shape of the gallery view, whereas the Windows version, we're still working on that feature. So it's a cool option in Mac that some people might enjoy. And then finally, me. Me just says I want to call this action on myself, which is the ZoomOSC client. Again, ZoomOSC joins the meeting as a participant, so it is totally valid to call some commands on yourself. And if you do that, you don't actually have to specify anything. We know who you are, so you don't have to otherwise identify yourself. All these other ones, if you're using somebody's username, well, you got to tell it the username. But with me, you don't have to send anything else. Now, instead of doing any of these options, we have a couple of other ways that you can build, right? So over here, we're talking about groups. So if you want to call an action like chat on a bunch of people, instead of building out a bunch of commands that were just all the usernames of the people in the call and then calling chat on each of them individually, we give you a couple of what we call macros, or ways of repeating a command to a set of people. So a macro, like all targets, panelists, and attendees. So all would be everybody on the Zoom call. Targets would be everybody in the target list that we talked about before. Panelists would be the webinar panelists, and attendees would be the webinar attendees. So if you want to, if you want to send a chat message to all of the panelists in a webinar, you would just do /Zoom/panelists/chat, and that would be how you would be able to send to them. These do not require any other identifying information because they're groups. You don't have to specify who's in the group. We know who's in the group, so you just use one of these macros. Now, there is an additional type of macro, and this one is special. It's called an exclusionary macro. An exclusionary macro is the combination of one of these macros with one of these target IDs. You put them together, and it allows you to make a custom group. So, for example, if I wanted to chat everybody except for a particular person, I would use all except. And when you use all except, you have to specify how you want to identify the person that you want to be in the exemption. So if you type /Zoom/all except, now you have to go back to the top of the document and you have to pick one of these again to identify that person. So if you want to say mute everybody but me, you would do, based on the way that the exemption list is laid out, /Zoom/all except me, and then you would do your action. You specify the user action that you wanted to call. And let's say now that you wanted to do it on everybody except for somebody named Andy. Well, here you would do /Zoom/all except user name to identify that you want to call this on somebody, and then you do the user action, and then you would do their name and maybe the message that you want to send. For example. So all except allows you to basically mix and match to create groups that are either subtracting from a group macro or building up from scratch. Now, that from scratch one is the user's one, and this one is really powerful when you're dealing with the multi-pin system or something like that, where you want to be able to just specify a group of people, and you want to build up that kind of from scratch, from zero, not presuming any of group macros. So if I said I wanted to chat a group of people, and I was going to specify who I wanted to chat, I would not use all except. I would just use users/username if I wanted to identify them by their name. And then I would just start typing names. Let's do that, and then hello. And so ZoomOSC knows that there's only one argument that's valid for a chat, so it'll kind of pop off this one, and then it will send it to everybody who's here. So Jonathan, Andy, and Nolan would get the hello message chatted from ZoomOSC by making a custom group. The really powerful combination is if you do, we take rid of this argument here, and we did add pin. This allows you to make a super source really easy. We'll talk about that more later. So that's how you can identify a group of people. Now the commands themselves, the actual, the meat of the application is here. This is where you identify people that you want to use. And the document has a page here that kind of teaches you how to read it. But the idea is that if you're looking for a feature, look on the left-hand side of the document and look at the headers and say, all right, well, if I wanted to deal with the spotlight, all right, here's the spotlight commands. And if I want to set the spotlight on somebody, I have this /spot. And the reason it's listed with a ... is because it is sort of the thing that comes at the end of the user selection. So again, we just showed you how you build this part of it. Now to get that last part with the action you want to call, you look at this list and you say, okay, spot, and that will spotlight somebody. And again, this could be mixed and matched. If you want to spotlight yourself, /zoom/me/spot. If you want to spotlight somebody based on their index in the gallery view, /zoom/gal index /spot, and then you say their index. Let's say it's the person who's 5th in the gallery view. That will spotlight them. Now, some commands are reserved for ZoomOSC Pro, like multi-pinning ones, and some other commands take arguments. So let's look at the screen share one, for example. So when you start a screen share in ZoomOSC Pro, you actually have the ability to specify what screen you want to start sharing. So again, screen share is a user action because ZoomOSC Pro has remote control options. So you would do /zoom/me if you want to start the screen share that's on your own computer, /start screen share. And then you would specify the ID of the window. So maybe it's something like //./display1. You know, that would be what it would be probably on a Windows machine or something like that. On Mac OS, maybe it's something like, I don't know, like Chrome or something like that, right? So if you wanted to do a start window share, it would take an argument, right? It would take an argument in addition to somebody. If you're using the remote control system, which we'll talk more about later, so no worries if you don't understand this right now, but I would do /zoom/username start window share and then Joe Chrome. So this will tell Joe to start a window share on the window Chrome. So the arguments for the last part of the command always come at the end, and the arguments that specify the people that we're doing it on come at the beginning. So what ZoomOSC does is it says, all right, you're using a start window share command. That takes one argument. So we're going to pop this off the list of payloads, and then everything else is going to be the group of people that we call the command on. So that's how that works. And then there's so many different user commands. We've really worked hard to expose as much as Zoom will allow us to expose so that you can call a lot of actions on them. Now, global commands are much simpler. The global command, because it applies to the meeting as a whole, doesn't need to be targeted on a specific user. They're not things you can remote control. They're not things that you can set for somebody else. They are just things that are about the state of the meeting in general. So when you use a global command, instead of doing any of this, you just go ahead and enter the full text as it appears here. So if you want to disable, or let's say you want to lower everybody's hand in a Zoom meeting, well, there's no reason to call that on somebody in particular because it's the same for everybody. Everybody's hand being lowered lowers everybody's hands. So you can just go ahead and enter in there /zoom/lower all hands, and that will just, there's no payload required, there's no arguments, you just send that in, and that'll lower everybody's hands. And there's a bunch of those too. There's memory management. This is, really for that workflow about the target IDs. And then there's the outputs. Now, outputs are a little different. They come out of ZoomOSC, and instead of being /zoom, they are /ZoomOSC. They're things that your application can listen to be able to react. Like if you wanted to have, if you wanted to get the active speaker's username when they're talking, so that you could title a lower third with it, we're constantly sending /ZoomOSC/ me or /user active speaker. And then you can parse that in the receiving application. We'll talk more about outputs later, but if you're ever looking to see, hey, what can I expect my application to be able to see from ZoomOSC, this listing here describes everything that the program sends out. And finally, if you're looking for support, you can sign up for Liminal's newsletter so you can learn about the features that we're sending out. You can join our public Slack group where there's a lot of people out there who are interested in helping each other get up to speed on ZoomOSC. And finally, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're going to try to be really good about posting information. And of course, at any time, if you need to reach out for support, you can email info@liminalet.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So I hope that this video explains a little bit more about how to read our documentation for ZoomOSC and helps to get off the ground to build some really powerful integrations to control Zoom.